All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Victory Over Self Radio, a podcast that dives into all things athletics. On this episode, we sit down with Kyle Jacksic of Ardrey Kell High School in North Carolina. We're going to talk a ton about New Jersey and Lynchburg, hopefully some training. Hope you guys enjoy. So first off, Kyle, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday morning, no less.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
All right. So Blair and Ross, had some family stuff to attend to, which everybody, understands now and then. So just going to be me rocking today. So I just kind of wanted to kick things off with, tell me how a guy from Northwest New Jersey, such as yourself and such as myself, ended up in Lynchburg, Virginia, going to school. So I attended Liberty, you attended University of Lynchburg. Talk to me about kind of that process that brought you from the Great White North down to, the Great South here in Lynchburg.
So I grew up playing sports. I actually grew up on like an 18-acre ranch. It was like people are super thrown off that those are actually things in New Jersey.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Really thought like my ticket towards kind of like the next level was going to be through wrestling, until I broke my neck in 3 places, which was kind of like what drove me down. The infatuation with the human body and athletic performance kind of route. I always wanted to go south for school, and I love my parents, but I wanted to kind of be able to have a fresh start. I remember driving down like the Blue Ridge Mountains, and we were driving into Lynchburg, and we were actually playing at a tournament at Liberty University, and we played the game over at what's Lynchburg College, to me, University of Lynchburg now, and they recruited me from there. I took a visit on campus, and it felt like home, and it felt like a place where I felt like I could start my career and as well as continue my baseball career there. So really grateful for it. I think being 6.5, 7 hours away from my parents was that kind of like perfect level. And Lynchburg was like, that's what we were talking about before. Lynchburg's like a big city compared to like where we're from. But still gave that small town feel.
No, it's perfect. So the entire world, of course, is not going to know this, but up in top left New Jersey, where we're from, there's farms, right? And there's some farm boys. So tell me, you grew up on an 18-acre ranch. Did your family, have livestock on there, or was it just a big plot of land?
So mostly plot of land. We had a massive farm across the street. We actually grew up as dog breeders.
Okay.
So I lived there with my parents and my grandparents, as well as like there was a rentable property. And then my grandfather was a foreign car mechanic. So he had 2 machine shops on the property. Yep. And we heated all those buildings with firewood through the winter. And if you know anything about New Jersey winters, that can be pretty harsh.
Yeah.
So it was really just managing the property. We had like a Christmas tree farm, believe it or not. But yeah, I grew up as dog breeders. I think at one point, we had as many as 15 dogs on our property.
Wow.
So just like a little plot of land. I don't even think our road ended up on a map. Didn't have a postal code, didn't have stoplights or anything in my hometown. So it's completely different from what people think of when they fly into Newark Airport for the most part.
No, for real. That's so my wife is Canadian. And she's from very, very rural Canada, above North Dakota. And so, again, flying into, I think she first flew into JFK with me. And so, she got that experience. And then it kind of, got smaller and smaller until we got to Northwest New Jersey, Sussex County. So you went to Blair Academy. And at Liberty, I was able to be the strength conditioning coach for our wrestling team. Told them I was from New Jersey and Sussex County, and one of my good old Southern boys was like, "Coach, Blair Academy?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do you know about Blair?" And so I didn't know that Blair had the wrestling program that it did. Obviously, growing up, I knew about Kittatinny High School. I knew about High Point High School. So what is it about Sussex County that is producing these phenomenal wrestlers, right? Like even years and years ago, Zach Ray from Hopacon, I think made it to Olympic trials or made it to the. So just I want to hear from your opinion. What is it about that makes it such a wrestling hotbed?
I think it's pretty much what we exactly talked about. Like
Hmm.
it's farm-based communities, it's blue-collar communities, it's hardworking communities. Because I think of what we did from a training perspective for
Hmm.
wrestling at Blair, from a GPP component of like swinging axes, swinging hammers, carrying firewood, pushing wheelbarrows, literally just like carrying your partner like up a hill, was like common practices in like kind of our training, which we didn't have a high school strength coach. And so we were like kind of behind, but we were just like that nitty gritty crowd. We had a really, really good coach. He actually, the year I got hurt was his last year at Blair, but
Hmm.
I mean, it was like a next man up kind of thing. You don't win 30 plus national titles without doing a
Yeah.
lot of the right things from a school. But what I think of, and like you even look at Cale Sanderson, who left Iowa State to become the head coach at Penn State, and
Hmm.
part of the reason why he wanted to go there was because Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Ohio are such hotbeds,
Yeah.
when really like 90% of those populations are from those farm-based communities where
Hmm.
you have a lot of functional strength. And then if you
Yep.
have a good enough coach that can steer them into kind of wrestling, winter sports, obviously you're stuck inside. So hockey can get a little expensive, and there's not a whole lot of hockey rinks out in the farm. And
Yep.
basketball wasn't really a driving force. So a lot of kids turn to wrestling. I think they do it young. A lot of parents are wrestlers. My dad was not. My dad was actually a hockey player and said, "You're never
Oh,
going to
no way.
wrestle," because he would run the hallways with the wrestlers and watch them throwing up in trash cans and running in
Yeah.
plastic bags just to cut weight. But I think just the connection between football and wrestling, the connection of kind of that GPP component, that what I know now, which I had no idea about, obviously, like when I was wrestling, I see that kind of bringing success to the sport and really just the communities that we grew up with.
Hmm. No, it's man, it's fun to reminisce. And so for the listeners and viewers, Kyle and I went to school in the exact same town. So he came into my hometown of Sparta and went to a private school there, put Reverend Brown, and then went to high school at Blair Academy. So with your youth wrestling, where were you doing that? What like program was that under? Were you wrestling in Sparta, out there in like the Kittatinny area, or did Blairstown area have their own kind of youth program?
So I started wrestling in fifth grade. I wrestled with the Blairstown like youth program.
Okay,
Got really good really fast because I was bigger and stronger than most of my opponents, as well
it
as
helps.
I wrestled
Yeah.
guys older than me. So by the time that I got to Reverend Brown, which was just for seventh and eighth grade, Pope John had heard of me, and
Yeah.
invited me into their room. But I mean, I wrestled 160 in seventh and eighth grade.
Wow.
So I was
Okay.
a pretty good sized kid,
Yeah.
as well as my mom worked at Blair, and was relatively close with the wrestling coaches there. And they're just like, yeah, like whenever he wants to come by practice, he can always roll around with us. And I remember like the first practice I wrestled at, I was wrestling in the room at Blair, and they put me with Ed Ruth, who was, I want to say, a two-time national champion at Penn State. He's kind of
Crazy,
taken
isn't
like
it?
the
Yeah.
MMA route.
Yeah.
But he was coming back from like rehabbing of injury. So here I am as like this little eighth grader wrestling, who was a four-time All-American in high school. I think he won 4 national titles in high school. I
Hmm.
mean, he was one of the top 5 like pound for pound recruits. But at Blair, like that's kind of like the normal. That's who you're
Yeah.
surrounded with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I wrestled kind of like with the club team. Our club team was called Sparta Pride.
Uh-huh.
Won a couple county championships with them, but at one point I think we had like 3 varsity wrestlers. Um, then we ended up like combining with Sparta, and I was lucky enough to wrestle with a kid named Kevin Wilkins, who ended up playing football at Rutgers and
Yeah.
then went on to the Philadelphia Eagles. him and I were partners, and we were lucky because we were the same age and we're almost the same size. Kevin was actually a little bit bigger than me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of 160 to 100 pound seventh and eighth graders walking around. So we pushed each other a lot. He came from much more of a football background.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked wrestling him because he was bigger and stronger. I think in wrestling, like you're dictated by your partner of how good they are and how strong they are. So I just kind of took steps up from there, ended up at Blair, and I was having a start of a pretty successful career before I got hurt.
Dang. Oh, man. All right. A blast from the past name, John Wilkins, Mr. Wilkins, Kevin Wilkins. Like, no way. All right. So now I'm seeing like all the overlap here. So did you get to talk to Mr. Wilkins at all? A bunch? Did he ever kind of train you? Did you see some of his workouts? Anything like that?
Yeah, he was my first quote unquote speed coach.
No way, dude. This is wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember driving with my dad to, I can't even tell you where the facility was in Sparta, but I remember
Yep.
I feel like walking down steps and like it was a little like almost
Yes.
like PT clinic kind of looking
Yep.
place. But yeah,
Health,
he was like my
health
first,
and body. Yeah.
yeah, he was my
No
first
way.
speed coach. Yeah, so me and the Wilkins family go way, way back, and
It's crazy.
I mean, Kevin and I were the same age once they adopted him, and so we kind of came up through the ranks together, and we're kind of
Nuts.
in and out of each other's lives. But I still consider him a good friend because we went through so much together.
Yeah. No, man, when you find a wrestling partner, like you go to war with that guy every day, and that's either you're either gonna bond or you're gonna hate each other and go the Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal route. But man, that's wild. So in Sparta, health and body was like it. That was the place to go if you wanted to be a good athlete, right? For middle school, high school training. Mr. Wilkins would come and for one summer train our football team at Sparta High School. And even now, when I work with youth athletes, I'm always thinking of like the training that I did way back in the day. And so I'm kind of asking all this very long roundabout question to get to this final one of, all right, so you have all those experiences of, I'm just going to call it being farm boy strong, of all the GPP that you develop as a wrestler. You got to train under Northwest New Jersey's premier youth guy with Mr. Wilkins. What have you stolen from your background, from your experiences, and how are you applying that now at Ardrey Kell? Or have you gone kind of a completely different route, and why? So yeah, let's get into that a little bit. And sorry, I know we didn't prep that question, but when we're having a talk like this, I got to ask.
Yeah, I think sometimes I look back I mean, I was exposed to Coach Wilkins. I was exposed to Zach Evanesh very early on. Like he was
No
like
way.
one of my first strength coaches.
Wow.
Who kind of
Okay.
gives like that
Wow.
like old school kind of style where
Yep.
a weight is a weight, and
Yep.
like we're gonna do this and we're gonna fling it over here and we're gonna turn here, and so like now when I look at, and especially when I'm assessing an athlete, I'll kind of like look back of like my career. I had a stint at Davidson College during COVID where we were outside underneath the tent on plywood platforms, and basically all I had was to train Division I athletes was two 20-kilogram kettlebells, because it was cheaper to get kilograms instead of pounds, and bands. So what can we do from a general practicing standpoint, even with Division I athletes who are at the culmination or the peak of their career? So I see that now, especially with high school and especially at the large capacity high school that I'm at, where I can't get everyone into the weight room at the same time, or we're doing stuff in hallways, we're doing stuff out on sidewalks. So I want my kids to be functionally strong. I think that's a driving force for me.
Yeah.
What I learned at Davidson was GPP is king. If
Yeah.
I can create, and even when we've had conversation with Bill Gillespie of like his like course that he had guys jumping over and walking across sticks and rocks, and I
Oh
think that's
yeah.
all stuff that we can really drive, and where COVID is going to take like the biggest negative hit in like the upcoming high schoolers. Like I look at like the current like sixth and seventh graders that I come across now, and I mean they're functionally not as good movers because they were locked in their house for multiple months at a time.
Hmm.
Um, so I try to like push, pull, carry,
Yeah. Yeah.
rotate, throw, slam, and I do that across all of our sports because especially like when we look at, and I remember talking through with Ross at NHSSCA NatCon of that spinal engine theory that Bobby Stroop kind of brought up and kind of spoke on, and I mean
Hmm.
spoke on for 6 hours. We were in a room with Bobby Stroop,
Yeah.
which was amazing and really eye opening. Especially to me and especially to my intern who was with me, who's now a full-time high school strength coach too. Um, but like strength is going to be king, but functional strength is going to get us there.
Hmm.
And just driving forces of being more mechanically efficient and just kind of letting that be a driving force of pushing our athletes forward. I think is my biggest takeaway. So I still look back, and then like even my college experience at Lynchburg where we had 7 racks in this asbestos ridden building with Ed Smith.
Yeah.
Of kind of like simplifying, and I thought I knew a lot until I saw a Tendo unit at University at Buffalo, and then that
Mm.
kind of sent me down this rabbit hole. And like I'm a byproduct of every single coach and every single person that I've learned from, and I think that's the normal in strength and conditioning too.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's so have you found yourself ever thinking like, man, I did more as a kid than, these kids are doing? And does that ever make you think like I could push them harder, or does it give you the like, man, kids are just different now type of feeling?
I think to start, I want to say I can push kids more,
Hmm.
because like what we've understood from like a recovery standpoint, um, our kids aren't growing up cutting wood and like heating their house with firewood and
Yeah.
cutting down trees and digging holes. So I think that they can be pushed. I think there's a higher level of stress on children now. So
Yeah.
knowing when we have to dial back and where, well, we know like when it's heavy duty exam week, we know injury rates
Hmm.
will go up. So
Yeah.
what can I do from a strength and conditioning standpoint to kind of adapt to that? But I think we can always push kids more if they're ready and willing to receive it.
Mm.
Um, like I always talk about with our kids, like the power of belief.
Yeah.
I say to our kids, like I think we have the best strength and conditioning program in the country. Do
Hmm.
we? No, not at all. But do we believe that we do, and will we get more out of it if we do? Then we're going to be more successful kind of in like the long term route because
Hmm.
we truly believe that what we're doing is the best thing that we can be doing.
Yeah. No, I love that. Wh- at Blair, did you guys? So I don't know if you followed like the New Jersey high school curriculum or anything, but every like year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, in your English class, you had to write a big paper. And I think it was my junior year, we had to write a paper on like an influential American, past, present, whatever. Uh, and I chose Lil Wayne, the rapper, because when I was going through high school, this was 2007 to 2010. Like Lil Wayne was it. And so I watched a bunch of his interviews, and he has multiple songs like titled "Best Rapper Alive." He has multiple songs where he says he's the best rapper, and an interviewer asked him like, "Wayne, do you really believe that?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course I believe it. Of course I believe I'm the best rapper alive. Otherwise, why would I be putting out music? I hope every rapper, I hope every artist thinks they're the best. Otherwise, like, why would you put out a mediocre product?" So yeah, that power of belief, like that always stuck with me. So I like that. And if you could get everybody in a room, especially, and we'll get into it later with your population size of athletes that you have, like, man, that's big, right? That creates buy-in, that creates culture for sure. So to kind of stay with, the blasts from the past a little bit before we get into kind of the present time and your current training, who in your life has inspired you down the coaching route? Right. So when I look back, I realize, oh, my dad coached every single youth sport as I was kind of coming up. My mom was a teacher. Right. So like I could kind of see those roots being planted from the time I was in, kindergarten. Do you have a relative or a coach growing up, or was there a coach along your athletic journey that really kind of let you know, like, man, this is something I'd like to do. I'd like to impact people this way as well?
Yeah, like my dad coached a good amount of youth sports. He coached me in football and
Mm,
baseball
yeah.
growing up, really until I got to high school. My grandfather was the one that I kind of grew up with the most,
Yeah.
growing up on the same property with
Mhm.
my dad working. Like my dad drove 50 miles one way to be a police officer in West Orange. Um,
Oh, wow. Okay.
so like
Wow.
that's not easy.
Uh,
So I couldn't really spend a lot of time with him. But meanwhile, my grandfather was on our property, and I wouldn't necessarily say like he was kind of like that nitty gritty athlete. Like I kind of grew up terrified of my grandfather for a good little while
yeah.
until really I got to high school and I had a positive relationship with him. I realized how just stupid smart he was.
Mm,
He was a tremendous teacher. Like he taught me life skills
yeah.
that I still use today of how to fix cars or how to install a dishwasher. And it's all
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that like kids now maybe probably don't get exposed to because they don't necessarily have that person in their life. So I think like I learned how to teach from him. But then I remember getting to Lynchburg, and we had Dr. Steve Smith, who was the strength coach there before
Mhm.
Ed Smith was there, and both of them just kind of really invested in me.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
Saw that I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew like, oh, exercise science, exercise performance. I thought I was going to be a physician's assistant for orthopedics.
Hmm.
I thought that was going to be my driving force, but I remember having a conversation with Ed. I think we were doing like RDLs one day when we were in college, and
Yeah.
he kind of like came up to me. He's like, "Are you going to put some weight on the bar?" And like I kind of like took that because like that's kind of like the coaching that I received was like I'm gonna drive you into the ground and make you
Uh-huh.
quit, and that was kind of like that's what was my driving force. So when
Hmm.
Ed said that, like I thought that we had a really good relationship and we really built from there. So what he poured into me, from helping of I saw how kids and student athletes connected with him, and as much as I tried to fight it because I was just like, oh, there's no job security, the money's not right, strength and conditioning probably isn't what's best for me because I want to get married young and I want to start a
Yeah.
family young. So it's just like, oh no, strength and conditioning. Um, but then when I worked under Matt Gildersleeve at Buffalo, University of Buffalo, he's now at University of Kansas. I remember having a conversation with him. He's like, you're way too good at what you do to just let that not be part of your existence.
Hmm.
Um, so then from there, I've just kind of like taken steps up and just let those voices that have come before me just keep driving. And now I'm trying to give back to my internship program and the high schoolers that I
Love
coach
that.
now
Yep.
of just like you can do whatever you want, and happiness needs to be your number one thing. Like I tell myself all the time, like I drive 45 miles to work one way
Hmm.
across the city of Charlotte, but I would not trade my job for anything in the world.
Yep.
I truly love it. I truly believe it's the best thing for me. And sometimes you have a little bit of self-doubt, but all
Oh, yeah.
those all those guys
All
I
the
just
time.
talked about always just drove that self-doubt out of me, and I think I'm better for it.
Awesome. So the power of an older, wiser loved one or relative from the early age, and then coaches who weren't easy, pushing you to be better, and inspiring you, giving you that hope, giving you that confidence. In June, I went to a conference in Michigan, and it was a hockey conference. I'm just the hockey weight room guy. I don't know anything about the sport, but it was a sport-based conference, and there was a coach who at this conference asked the audience, who is the best teacher that you ever had? And so, it's a room full of the top hockey coaches in the world. But for me, I don't know who anybody is because I don't follow hockey super well. So I don't care. So I yell out my high school history teacher's name, Brian Brennan. And the speaker just zeroes in on me and he goes, "Was he easy?" I go, "No, he was the hardest teacher I had." Right. And so when you mentioned Coach Smith coming over and saying "Hey, you're going to put some weight on this bar," it's the best coaches aren't your best friend. They're not easy. They're people that push you, that give you goals, that motivate you for more or for better. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that nugget with you. Not saying you're running an easy program or whatever at all, but just it's a good reminder that young people respond to just that difficult authority in a loving manner, and it seems like that's what has helped you and gotten to you to where you're at today. So tons of things I really want to get into, but I would be foolish not to kind of go over some of the questions that Ross and Blair also wanted to ask. That way, this isn't just the Chris show as we're interviewing you. But so anybody could kind of look you up online and see how you've somewhat traveled up and down the East Coast here, pursuing this dream. So you've landed at Ardrey Kell. This, is it the biggest or second biggest public school in North Carolina, right? So what does your role look like there now? Okay. High school strength and conditioning at this massive school. You could give me whether it's day to day, what a week looks like, but just kind of describe what that role there looks like for you.
Yeah, so I train most of our student athletes. I have about 200 kids during the day between classes. Probably 80% of them are from general population, so I got to train a lot more of my athletes after school.
Okay.
North Carolina in general is behind the times in having full-time strength and conditioning coaches. Right now I'm back in school to get my teaching license just to work at a public school. Crazy. And at this point, that's kind of like tough pill to swallow, and it's become like a real pain in the ass to do. So I mean, I start the day, we have an athlete only block, and then I have 2 blocks of kind of general population. Our football coach will run kind of a girls only strength and conditioning class as well. That's a steady mix of athletes and general, and I have that during my planning period. But really planning period is also during lunch block. So I spend a lot of time talking to athletes and inviting them into the weight room because we're really close to the cafeteria, whether it's just sit down and eat lunch, or if they want a foam roll or band stretch, or if I can kind of help the athletic trainer with some rehab stuff during that time. Being able to have our kids be able to utilize our space, I think, is important. And then after school, I always say, my second job starts at 2:30. So I usually have 3 to 4 blocks of 45-minute blocks after school where I'm training a wide variety of teams depending on the day, depending on the season. I train almost all of our teams, and we're a couple steps away from training literally everyone.
Crazy.
I could have a group of 15 in the weight room. I could have a group of, I'll take as many as 80 to 85. I got a 2,400 square foot weight room, but I'm lucky that I got a whole lot of kettlebells, a whole lot of dumbbells that I can kind of, and then bands that I can kind of take out in the hallway or take out onto the sidewalk. I have really supportive sport coaches who are invested and they're a part of the lift, and I think they're really good coaches as well. I have interns kind of in and out that help me kind of spread out and spread thin. But really, I got to make the most of my opportunities. For the most part, I'm only seeing our athletes twice a week for 45 minutes tops. Football and baseball get a little bit more, but they invest into my program pretty good amount, so they kind of sweeten that pot for themselves.
Yeah.
As well as like I'm a baseball guy, so I'll always kind of like push for baseball, but the sport coach is very invested in it. But also like the dynamic that we may not see too is, and like I didn't really see it growing up, was all of my kids lived within 10 minutes of school. So if they can go home for 2 hours and do homework or take a nap or whatever, like they can drive back to campus and come to lift, even if it's 4:45 in the afternoon,
Yep.
rather than just the 2:30 time. Because it's going back to that culture piece. Like if it matters to them, they make it work, because there's really no excuse when you live less than 10 minutes from school to get back for a training session with me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so, you mentioned right now you're going back for a teacher's licensure. So when Ross came and worked with us at Liberty, he really helped me understand the need for, if you have an undergraduate degree and a CSCS and you're going for a master's degree, get it in education. And I've heard you mention that on another podcast. So can you just go into why you think master's in education, and then when you do get your teacher's licensure, will your day change at all? Will things look different for you? You mentioned, you have your athlete only block, you have some general pop, your second job starts at 2:30. What would it look like if there's any changes at all?
Yeah, so I think driving that undergraduate CSCS population to getting a Master's of Education degree, because when we look at job descriptions, when we look at openings wherever, it just says Master's Preferred. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Master's of Science. I did the unfortunate thing that I thought I was going to go into the collegiate and professional realm, so I got a Master's of Science. And now, like, on the other end of COVID and all the different parts of my career, I have a major regret of just not getting a Master's of Education, because now I just have something stuck in my side doing classwork when I can be data processing or programming or assessing more athletes. But I have some time consuming things. My job isn't going to change when I get my teaching license. So currently, like, I'm teaching on what they call is like an emergency license. I'm in a program through East Carolina, which is all online, asynchronous, which is beneficial, especially asynchronous to a strength coach, because I'm going to do stuff when I got the time to do it. So I think just driving that, but also kind of spinning it on its head. If we want better strength coaches, if we want just better coaches in general, not necessarily in strength and conditioning, we need to start looking at how we get educators in the building. Because I was lucky to go to a private school where you don't need a teaching license to teach at a private school. Like, our dean of science in high school worked at NASA. My freshman year biology teacher was one of the founding scientists on oxycodone. Like, those aren't necessarily normal people that you see at a public school. But we want these kids to learn from all these people from different parts of life, but nothing that I'm going to learn in a K through 12 health and physical education teaching licensure program is going to prepare me to be a strength and conditioning coach. It's just not. You can learn stuff after, but we need to look at it from a state and a national level of, okay, I understand going for education for if you're teaching elementary English or middle school history, or even like some of those high school subjects. But if we have something as specific as I'm teaching strength training, I'm teaching athletic performance, and I have 2 degrees in exactly that, what am I getting out of just having a teaching licensure other than spending money and spending time on it? Especially like we had, I think going into this school, we had over 400 teacher openings in our school district. People aren't going to school to be teachers right now.
Wow. Wait, so K through 12, in all the multiple schools in that district, you had 400 like open teaching positions.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but okay. Okay.
But that's like exactly it. So it's like, how are we getting people in the buildings that may be really, really good at something, but don't
Hmm.
come with a teaching license? Like I
Yeah.
saw with one of my interns who's now a full-time strength coach up in the Chapel Hill area. Like he was getting denied from jobs because he didn't have a teaching license. I'm like, he has a master's in strength and conditioning, and you want him to teach strength training.
Hmm. Yeah. What are we doing?
He's ready and willing to work, and he will go to
Hmm.
school to get his teaching license because he's a hard worker and he's fresh out of school. Luckily, I'm still relatively fresh out of school too.
Hmm.
So having classwork isn't necessarily like super daunting to us. Um, but you're looking at a person who has experience out of the wazoo, degrees and everything, certifications and everything, and you're turning them away because they don't have a teaching licensure.
Hmm.
What are we doing from a state and national level to kind of progress education forward and get more specific and more hands-on educators in the building?
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And I I could take, my public school education in Sparta as an example. One, three teachers that I had that were super impactful for me. Mr. Brennan, he taught Russian, and he was an FBI translator, right? So he came in wanting to teach. Miss Shapini, she worked at here's a place you'll be familiar with, Mountain Creek, right? So she worked in that corporate world for forever, and then came and taught our marketing classes. And then Mr. Brady, he was a chemistry teacher who worked as a chemist in some lab, cooking stuff up. There was a day where I was a junior, and the senior prank, they like glued all the locks so like teachers couldn't get in their classrooms, and Mr. Brady like created some glue solvent solution in his little high school lab and went around and got all the locks off. But yeah, it's a great point where if you could have people come in from the real world to teach, and now they're going to get that practical experience for the kids. It makes a lot of sense. I get that, but yeah, especially in strength conditioning, like you want somebody who has the educational background, not a K through 12 background. For undergrad at least. I definitely agree with that. So you mentioned earlier data processing. So you have a lot of student athletes. What data are you collecting, if any? How are you doing that? What are you doing with it?
A lot of data collecting and data processing that I do is really, it's got to be able to be test retest.
Hmm.
So how are we progressing? What are our big rocks? When I got to Ardrey Kell, I was just like, oh, we're going to be running APRE systems. Like I'm going to do all these strength tests. And then I quickly realized like when I got 60 athletes in a
Yeah.
room and I got 10 racks and there's one of me and my sport coaches aren't going to necessarily hold it to the same grade or
Hmm.
whatever, and their kids aren't going to hold it to the same grade for each other. So I had to literally be like, okay, this probably isn't going to be valid. So it was going to be crap. It was going to be time consuming. APRE, teaching a kid to get to a 1 rep max or a 3 rep max or like all these different strength tests probably wasn't going to be very beneficial
Hmm.
and wasn't going to be efficient in the long run for me. Um, so I really need to like bang for your buck, unarguable, not arguable data. So a lot of the data that I track now is I have a laser timing system that I do like I'll do a
Oh,
5 yard
awesome.
build in flying 10 and then a 20
Hmm.
yard build in flying 10 that I test pretty consistently. I'll have like my baseball guys run 30s. But really I'm like I need to be able to flow. If I can't put the quick run setting on my laser timers, then it's probably not going to be efficient to me.
Hmm.
Um, Jump mat readings, I think, is important. I eventually want to get to a point where I have a little bit better of an RSI kind of
Hmm.
tester because I think RSI and we can head down the speed route here shortly, but I
Looking
think is
forward to
important
it.
to
Yeah.
me. And then I just placed an order for, I don't know if you know Exerjo which is an isometric reader.
No,
And
no.
we're gonna move into an isometric mid thigh pull. I think I know Cody Hughes has one down in Alabama. Mark Hoover
Hmm.
has one down in South Carolina. But it's just like a 10-second on basically build your own platform. Like you screw it into wood, and it's going to be a 10-second isometric mid thigh pull. And I'm just going to test really force production because it's a lot
Perfect.
easier to do a 10-second isometric mid thigh pull than get an APRE 3
Hmm.
squat across the longevity of 4 weeks. If it
Yeah.
takes 10 seconds for me to do it and I can do it every single week, that's probably going to be more beneficial to my program
Hmm.
by the end of it.
It's funny. I'm using APRE with my college hockey players who I've been with for years and years. 24 of them, plus an assistant, plus 2 interns, and a college student worker. And I have Team Builder, and it's still difficult to run APRE. I can't fathom in a high school where it might be a 1 to 85, coach to athlete ratio. So I get it, right? Like the books, the presentations, they all sound great, but what's actually practical that we could do with it? So real quick, you mentioned a laser timer. Which one are you using? And does that go to a cloud, or are you having athletes or a coach hand record times?
So I have the new Dasher Blue system,
Okay, perfect. Yep.
which I definitely suggest. I had the old Dasher system at my last stop, and now this is the new
Hmm.
Dasher system, which I think cleaned up like a lot of like the hard parts that we ran into.
Hmm.
But really, like all of my testing, I need my sport coaches to be able to look at a screen,
Hmm.
see a number, and write down that number, whether
Perfect.
it's
Yep.
them writing it down or like they're like conveying that to somebody else.
Hmm.
For the most part, I'll usually run the Dasher stuff, or like uh, some of my sport coaches can get it, but like I always worry about it becoming disconnected. But the Dasher Blue system has cleaned that up really
Awesome.
well,
Good.
because you can literally click to reconnect, and you don't have to move, and you don't have to turn the laser on and off in order to get
Hmm.
there. Um, so really, it's the sport coaches carrying out the testing. If it's something like a broad jump, which I'll do with some of our sports, like I want that to be me consistently. I
Hmm.
may not be the one writing down the number, but I'm the one reading the number. But like, it's hard to mess up a jump, Matt. It's
Yep.
relatively hard to mess up a dasher timing system. And once I teach these coaches this new Exergo technology, like it's going to be hard to mess that up too, because it's
Yeah.
literally just click and start, telling them what to do, and click and stop. If
Hmm.
you don't think that sport coaches can't do that, you're probably selling your sport coaches really short,
Yeah.
especially if
Yeah.
they're invested in the strength and conditioning performance program. I always talk about, I even gave a presentation on it last year at our state clinic for NHSSCA. I talked about like my whole like realm of rehab assessment and everything else, but one of the slides that I talked about was high performance model installation.
Hmm.
But at the high school level, like you're the sports scientist, you're the strength
Yeah.
coach, you may be the rehab person, you may be the psychologist. Um, so for us, I always say that my school has a high performance culture.
Hmm.
We have kids that care enough to be like, what does my GPS unit say?
Hmm.
What was my top speed at practice yesterday? What
Awesome.
did what did Sally get on the jump mat? Oh, I'm gonna
Hmm.
go jump higher than her. Um, so we've created enough competition, we've created enough care about the data, because we're exposing our kids to technology, and that's what high schools want us to do now is
Oh
expose kids
yeah.
to technology.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that in a strength and conditioning group. Um, but yeah, like leaning on the sport coaches, I'll have my interns run it when I have
Yeah.
enough of them. But I also like I need to coach the strength and conditioning side. I don't necessarily need to coach. I don't need to coach laser timers
Hmm.
because it's going to tell me what's happening.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
that's
also go
perfect.
back and look at the data.
Yeah, we also use the Dasher system at Liberty. So in my department, it's me, a phenomenal second guy, Jared, and then we have 2 GAs. So Jared runs the dasher over at our other facility. And even just like, even if you just use a measuring tape and record broad jumps, kids will do anything they can to squeak out an extra inch. They will go, coach, one more, right? If you just time it, if you record it, man, they care so much. I've had kids want to stay for 10 minutes after just trying to jump higher or further, but they don't want to lift more weights or, do more reps of bench. They want that thing that you're recording or timing. So really cool with that. I absolutely, I just keep taking notes on like things I want to eventually talk about here. So when you see me scribbling, that's what we're doing here. Absolutely. I want to talk about your internship program. I definitely want to ask about the ISO mid thigh pull, but before we do that, I think it's worthwhile mentioning, all right, so in high school wrestling, you got this neck injury, right? And then that kind of brought you into the rehab-ish world and almost took you into the rehab world, as you've shared before. So with that background in rehab, what has it been like coming into Ardrey Kell and establishing relationships with your ATs, your sports med staff? Because I have found that it could either be you're butting heads and you hate each other, or you're working together. Obviously, working together is a little bit better. So have you been able to speak the same language as them? Are you going in humbling yourself and kind of bowing down to them in terms of, make them feel good and like you? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
I think the first step for any coach that's really trying to do it, especially at the next level, is building the process in which you need to run. So what steps do we take in moving through the direction? So when I got to Ardrey Kell, I kind of already had a rehab installation done at my last spot. So I'm like, okay, like these are the steps that I take. So when I sat down with the athletic trainer, and really we can call the sports med staff, but we have 1.5 full-time athletic trainers, and then we send kids out for physical therapy when they need that, when they need to go to physical therapy. But she was on her way out. I was part of the hiring process for our new one because I wanted to drive rehab so much. But really it all started with, I wanted to build relationships with who affects our kids the most.
Got it.
So if they have a physical therapist, or even if they have an outside strength coach or personal trainer, I wanted to build that relationship.
Really cool.
So I spent like a lot of my free time actually going into the physical therapy clinics that our kids go to, which we're very good, or we're very lucky. We have 2 really, really good ones that are actually underneath the same umbrella that are within 5 minutes of us. So I'm like, okay, what kids are going to these physical therapists, and then making that connection with them. So then when I do need to send a kid to physical therapy, all I got to do is shoot a text. That parent's getting a call less than an hour later from the physical therapy clinic trying to set up an appointment for their child. And now all of a sudden the child is bought into what we're trying to do, but the parent is bought into what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Because that's that high performance model. That's that high performance culture. So I had like all of these prep plans, which is really just like body weight stuff that's up on my YouTube page that takes care of a lot of like the common injuries that we have from overuse. Like all of my basketball guys do our knee prep plan.
Perfect.
All of my volleyball girls will do a lot of some ankle, some knee, some shoulders, but really like low back. Because like low back is a true pandemic right now too, because these kids are sitting all day and their psoases and their hip flexors are getting tight. So what can we do to counteract that? And they can do that literally watching TV or like watching a video during homework. It takes them 5 minutes to do. So dosing that correctly. But we were at a point, and we're at a point now where if a kid gets injured, no matter the severity of it, they're starting with our athletic trainer. They're not going to urgent care on a Saturday where, we think you sprained your foot, so we're going to say no physical activity and we're going to put you in a boot for 2 weeks. If I got a Division I kid who needs to play and is a major part of that, him going to urgent care isn't going to help us, because as soon as he comes back with that doctor's note, it's not going to be very positive.
Mm-hmm.
So having that assessment process from our athletic trainer,
Really cool.
sometimes we're doing that assessment process together.
Wow. Okay.
So this is what I'm seeing from, whether it's a strength biomechanical perspective, this is what she's seeing from her athletic training background, her different movement assessments, and now we've kind of like blurred that line together. But my athletic trainer is not afraid to walk into my weight room, look at what the training session is for the specific team, or shoot me a text and say, what do you have for team lift today and where can we make adjustments? And we have enough trust in each other to say, oh, he can do single arm stuff, but like let's lay off of like anterior pressing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can make that happen pretty easily, because we're very stimulus chasers. And then we're even at a point now where I take kind of like a triphasic dynamic to our rehab process, and we're
Fire me
seeing
up.
that.
Yeah.
We're seeing that be very, very successful in that athletic training room as well as in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that we're going to load eccentrically and isometrically well before we put our kid back on the court or back on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So having that process together and being able to work through it together, where she comes from a sports performance based physical therapy athletic training background, and then I come from a rehab based sports performance background, and kind of just blurring that line together and working together and just constant communication is where we see the most success.
Awesome, man. That's high level. Holy, that's high level stuff for a high school. Nothing wrong with like my trainers or anything that I had in high school. Although one of them really did believe in Bigfoot and like told stories to the kids all the time while I was taping ankles. But that's high level. And so even for me, like at the college level, introducing some of that like triphasic in nature rehab return to play stuff, it's unreal. Have you read Cal Dietz's banded peaking method book on Coach Tube, and have you used any of that for return to play at all?
Yeah, so I think like any like band assisted stuff and really anything from that book is where we see kind of our late stage rehab programs.
Yep.
Because really, like I just take them through. I mean, it's watered down triphasic, but
yep.
We'll like when you are most recently injured, you will go through eccentric based training.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll go through isometric based training to then be able to produce force.
Yeah.
But especially when I have a kid coming back from a knee injury, from an ankle injury, and overspeed training and band assisted training is already in my program enough. Mm-hmm. So it's a normal exposure to them.
Yeah.
We're just dialing it back, or we're watering it down, that maybe, okay, we're going to lessen some volume, but we're still going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or, okay, like we're going to be this band level, we're going to be this level, this angle here.
Really cool. Wow.
And like that's getting into specificity in the program too. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to say like something is sports specific or something is rehab specific or prehab mm-hmm. specific in our program. I think that's where like the triphasic dynamic that we're able to bring to our rehab process has brought us a whole lot of success. Yep. It's gotten our kids back faster, but it's also lessened the chances of re-injury because mm-hmm. we're exposing them to speed and force
yep.
that they wouldn't necessarily be exposed to except in game. Mm-hmm. Because if I never prepare a kid for it, then they'll never be ready for it.
Yeah.
Like we can go down the speed route with that too. Like I know, according to our GPS units, that my football guys need to hit 93% of their max velocity that we've ever tracked on them once a week. Mm-hmm. And as of last night, our football season is over. We made it through a football season with 145 guys with 0 hamstring pulls.
Wow.
Like
wow.
It's tough
That's
to
huge.
say, and like I'm just this little, I wouldn't say little, but I'm just this high school coach in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But it's working. It's
Hmm.
working. It's working. And it's worked at multiple places now too.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's hopefully we could dig in a bit more. I want to kind of switch notes here, so I'm gonna slow down for a second. I want to set you up well here. Take your time and answer well here. Um, how's your marriage? Right, like you're talking about a lot of this stuff. What's your marriage like? So for me, I'm asking that from the perspective of every big name that I steal from and respect in the field seems to have been divorced at least once, and that's not an option for me. And so I really put my wife, my marriage above a lot of things. However, the demand of the job it's a lot, right? And everything you're saying there, that's a lot of work. So how's your marriage? Talk to me about that. Give some inspiration here for all the other coaches.
Yeah, so I met my wife in Lynchburg.
Oh, awesome.
We took anatomy class together.
No way. Yeah.
She's a nurse. I'm a strength coach, which you can only imagine like the butting of heads that we may have because
Yeah.
her stresses are super high, my stresses are super high.
Mm-hmm.
She's been lucky enough to be able to build a schedule that works for her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she understands that I'm going to go through seasons. I'm going to have super busy times.
Mm-hmm.
I try to come home and just kind of like when I'm home, like my laptop's not open. My
Awesome.
phone
Yeah.
is, I'm trying to lay off the phone the best
Mm-hmm.
I can. I'm not dead scrolling Twitter or reading books. And I'm actually probably one of the most underread strength coaches out there.
Doesn't seem like it, but okay.
Because social media has driven so much for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've done really well asking the right questions to the right people, and that's
Yeah.
how I've kind of gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we started dating my sophomore year of college, which was now I'm going to date myself, and I'm gonna make you feel bad here, Chris. We started dating in 2016, which was my
Okay.
sophomore year of undergrad.
Yeah. Yeah.
She moved with me to New York for me to go to
Awesome.
grad school,
Mm-hmm.
which we both have our regrets there. And I think we went through that together because when you don't see the sun for 6 months to 8 months, like that's tough.
You're telling me Buffalo, New York isn't an
Yeah,
ideal
yeah,
destination?
not the
Niagara
most
Falls is right
vacation.
there,
Yeah,
though.
it's
Yeah.
not the most vacation heavy.
Yeah.
But I'm even at a point now where like I love strength and conditioning podcasts and here I am sitting on one.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm driving home, if my truck is pointed in the direction of home, it is not strength and conditioning.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's not a strength and conditioning podcast. It's not getting on a phone with a coach. Every once in a while, it'll have to be. Um, but getting home and being assistive in that she is dealing with stresses that I can
Mm-hmm.
only imagine
Yep.
with pandemic-based nursing. She's
Exactly.
been like most of her career has been pandemic-based nursing,
Mm-hmm.
which is tough. Um, we're 6 hours away from our closest family members. So
Mm-hmm.
what can we do to create friends, create social life outside of that? Um, but living in a home that we enjoy living in, I think is important no matter what the dollar amount is.
Mm-hmm.
Or going out to dinner when money may be tight, but that's what we enjoy doing. Or I'm a craft beer lover. Like we love going
Yeah.
to
Hey.
breweries together.
Yeah. Yeah.
We love cooking together. Or but knowing when she's fed up enough and not overkilling her with like what's going on with my job, I think is
Mm-hmm.
where we've been the most important. We've been together 6 years now. We got married back in August after being engaged. Oof, we were engaged almost 3 years.
Wow. Wow.
We've lived in Virginia together. We lived in New York and now North Carolina together. We've been through a lot really, really young.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up with a lot of siblings, which was not what I was exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do to kind of bring that family dynamic in? but taking a break from my job. Like here we are on a Saturday morning, which she knows I had to do this, and she knew it was kind of like a long time coming. But okay, like what are we going to do like the rest of the day? She hates football season because it puts me home late, but I think that's the driving force of me not being a sport coach. Is that sometimes I do get home at 5 p.m. And making the most of it. And like I don't go to all of our football games because she loves Fridays in the fall.
Exactly.
So being home on a Friday night in the fall for her in the beautiful state of North Carolina is important. So what can I do to make that happen?
Awesome. No, that's a lot of wisdom that you shared of, I don't go to every game. Those are mistakes I made early marriage. It's Friday, Saturday night. I have to be at this hockey game. No, I could watch online, or I could, get the score the next day. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
Yeah. So that's actually a major basis of our culture in strength conditioning. For anyone listening, and even you, Chris, like Luke Day from University of South Carolina, who's the football strength coach there. He's actually spoke on that back-to-back Summer Strongs. So if you watch the first one, especially, that's where our standards in our weight room come from.
Wow. Okay.
Believe it or not. You're like, I'm driving out on the high school kids. But yeah, Angela Duckworth. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, perfect. So it took me a while to realize of my wife's love language being time. It's not time in the room with her. It's quality time with her. So yeah, just wanted to know that. And so last kind of marriage relational question. You guys like to go out to eat and stuff. So when you were in the great city of Lynchburg, Virginia, where were your spots off campus? Where would you guys go?
We loved Waterstone for a good little while. And then it kind of like when they started pushing a lot of the new restaurants downtown, I felt like Waterstone's quality didn't get as good. So we would end up at Bootleggers pretty consistently.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
We loved Bootleggers. And then Beer 88, which was on Lynchburg College's kind of side of town. Beer 88 and Neighbors. I still dream of the peanut butter burger at Beer 88. Those were kind of like the spots. And I know we got in I got in a Twitter thing with Ross a couple months back with the tea room, the Texas Inn. But yeah, like that was one of the best parts of Lynchburg was like all those kind of just like calm, go out to places to eat.
No, it's good. That's my wife and I have definitely been to a few of those spots as well. So when someone first mentioned, Beer 88, so I'm 31 years sober, just decided from a young age. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be at this place. And then I saw like their burger menu and I was like, oh, all right, like this is it. And exactly. Yeah. I had been putting peanut butter on burgers for a while. So yeah, no, that was perfect. So kind of bringing it back to the weight room side of things. It seems like you're a Cal Dietz fan. I'm a massive Cal Dietz fan. And if you've listened to the podcast, Mike and Brooker show, Cal was on there, and which, by the way, Mike announced you guys got to bring the podcast back. It was phenomenal. So Mike and Brooker show, Cal Dietz, I think the first episode, he talks about the skill of the back squat, the skill of the trap bar, the skill of the bench press. And if you don't practice those skills, supposedly your strength goes down. You could still be as strong, and you could still apply as the same amount of force, just not in that skill, right? So it really got me thinking of, I need to choose the most kind of like basic movements to be measuring in, because I don't want to measure the skill of a split squat. I don't want to measure the skill of a trap bar deadlift. But what if I did a mid-thigh pull to measure force production? So give me that's where I'm coming from. Give me your kind of background, thoughts, and ideas of why you want to kind of transition to this mid thigh pull. Literally last week, I was looking up leg dynamometers, to purchase. So we're kind of on the same path there. I want to hear, your reasonings.
Well, I think like when we look at strength and conditioning and like really like strength coaches as a whole, all of us always say is you do not see a back squat on the field.
Yeah.
You do not see a bench press on the field or on the court or in your perspective, the ice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what can I do and what can I test that boils my program down into the most simplistic performance-based numbers?
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah.
So I can lead all of these things in and say that this affects my force production or force. I don't want to say absorption, but I'm like I was actually just reading Dan Cleather the other day too, and now I'm like fumbling on it.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
But what can I boil down from my program, no matter what I'm doing in it, to say that, okay, this kid is performing better or giving the ability to perform better according to what I'm doing. Because then if he or she is not, what am I doing that may be hindering that?
Yeah.
So like for us, like we kind of check the boxes of vertical jump, force production, and linear speed. Three pretty major parts of sports performance.
Yeah.
Because that's really what we are. We're performance-based coaches. Strength and conditioning as a whole is actually a pretty terrible term to what I do. Like being the director of strength and conditioning doesn't boil everything down.
Yeah, agreed.
So having those tests that say, like an isometric mid-thigh pull, if I do not do isometric mid-thigh pulls in my program, in my weight training program, the only time that they're going to be exposed to that is when they test it. So yes, for a most part, like they may be able to get better at the skill of doing an isometric mid-thigh pull. But if it's nowhere else in my program because I don't have the proper J hooks to set it up,
then
it's going to be completely different. So I always look at it through the lens of what am I testing in my program that is going to show me that we have performance-based successes. And to me, maximal strength or strength-based movements, for the most part, is just not what I want to test and what I get the most out of.
Yep. That a boy. No, I love that. I don't know if you could tell. I'm getting hot and bothered here. If I start sweating a bit, you're getting me fired up. So I literally just wrote down of like, all right, we have a vertical and a horizontal displacement, right? So this is my thoughts. You could just tell me I'm an idiot later, but jump mat, great way to measure the vertical displacement. Horizontal broad jump is great. You have a dasher system. I have a 1080 sprint. We could take a 0 to 5, and essentially that's it as well. Like how much can you project yourself out? How fast? How far can you get in a certain amount of time? Force, yeah, the ISO mid thigh pull, and then linear speed. Again, you have a dasher. I have a 1080. I have a dasher system at a different facility. Yeah, no, I get it. I absolutely get it. And so with your mid thigh pulls, are you planning on doing like a force to body weight ratio? That way the kid who, goes home for Christmas break and gains 30 pounds and comes back, all of a sudden didn't get that much stronger. They just got that much heavier. Or have you not thought of it yet because you don't have, the equipment yet?
Part of me wants to do force to body weight, and then part of me just wants raw, biggest force production number that comes up on the screen. Because if the kid's going to be like, 3,000, like
that's pretty cool.
Like that's
pretty cool.
That's a high number. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I think I'm going to side in the raw number because I don't really, my kids never really get like the exposure of like pound for poundness.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Um, so putting that over body weight is just like whatever.
Yeah.
I like raw numbers, especially
Hmm.
because I have such a wide variety of athletes. Like I got a 295-pound kid that can do a cartwheel, a backflip, and can jump like 28 inches.
All right.
And
Yeah.
he's gonna be near the top of whatever in force production at the end of
Yeah.
the day. Um, but really, it's just like I think I have enough internal competition
Hmm.
that body weight almost doesn't matter. Because like sometimes like I look at a kid, I'm like, oh, that kid weighs like 175, and they step on the scale and they're like 150.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like body weight, especially with the fluctuation in high school, because they're growing, especially in high
Very
school
true.
males,
Very true. Yeah.
isn't always going to be a telltale sign for me.
Hmm. No, that's a very good point. Very, very good point. Um, Talking with Ross and Blair a bunch, they really helped me realize like I'm dealing with recruited college athletes level, right? It just all my stuff is it just is what it is. It's different, right? It just is. No, I'm very excited to keep kind of following along with the ISO mid thigh pulls that you might do, and this just reminded me of a story of we were talking with Brandon Pig, and he was basically saying the same thing you did of like I have to be able to trust my sport coach to run a timing system, like they should be able to. And then a couple of days later, he's like, I had a coach that did the entire workout wrong. Yeah, I just pretty funny. So we reached out. We wanted to get you on the podcast. And hey, what are some of the things you like to talk about? And one thing you brought up was the ALTIS system, which immediately sets off a light bulb for me. I am 1,100% stealing everything that Tony Holler has done with sprint-based football, and I'm trying to make sprint-based hockey. Complete, absolute thievery going on there. So I love speed. I love talking about it. You're familiar with the ALTIS system. So just give me some big takeaways from that. What are the things that you really like, or what are the things that you're applying every day that you're like, man, everybody should be doing this?
Yeah, so when I boil down kind of like my biggest takeaways and pillars from what I've learned from the Altus system and how it affects us not only from a speed program, but also just a general performance program.
Hmm.
Um, I spend a lot of time understanding or trying to drive the understanding of rhythm. Um,
Hmm.
I think
Perfect. Yep.
Stu McMillan talks a lot about the rhythm of stuff. Like how does temporal patterning, especially to a high school kid, a developing brain, which you're training developing brains as well. And pretty much
Hmm.
most of the people that will ever listen to this podcast are 99% of the brains that we're training are still developing.
Yep. Yep.
So what can I do from a temporal patterning standpoint in order to increase athleticism and increase movement quality? Because what I always go back and look at is I've never looked at a bad mover and said that kid is very athletic.
Mm.
It just doesn't,
Go on.
like those don't go hand in hand. So if I increase movement quality because I increase rhythm and timing and patterning, I'm probably going to increase athleticism.
Hmm. Yep.
So that's like really like the first pillar that kind of comes to mind to me. Shape, I think, is important. Whenever I talk about our speed program, I always talk about that we have a conceptual model. I have an ideal model that I want our kids to run like. Is every single kid going to look the exact same? No. Are most of my kids going to run very, very alike because I teach a track-based linear speed program? Probably.
Hmm.
Especially if I get them early on, which I won't necessarily see the benefits of my speed program for a couple years now,
Yeah.
because It's hard to develop juniors and seniors who may only get to the 6 months of the ALTIS system. But we have ideal shapes that we want to be in order to get there. And then in turn, I would like talking about Dan Path talks about peace, not relax, peace. Because I think we have a lot of kids who think that being faster and being compact and being better all around is by grinding everything. So a lot of what I have to talk about a lot of the time, and even in our strength training based program, not even our speed training based program, is quiet and clarity. What is the brain doing in order to happen? Because if we look at videos of 100-meter runners running down the track and we look at just their face, it's almost droopy. Because they're so at peace, they're so quiet, and they're fluid in that. So what can I do from a fluidity standpoint with different base movements, maybe in warm-ups, maybe in the strength training program, the speed training program, to kind of bring them at peace, where they're going to be quiet, they're going to be compact. I always talk about with all of our speed programs is I don't want to hear you run. And when the kids start to understand that cue, not only do we get faster because we're more at peace and quiet, but we're also running more efficiently. And if we look at Charlie Francis and Speed Reserve and everything else, like if I'm just having better, more efficient movers, hopefully, one, we're going to be better conditioned because we're not going to tire as easily. It's going to be easier for us to go 60 to 80% where most of sport is actually played, which is just going to up performance qualities really in the long run. So again, I write a lot about peace and talk about peace with our teams, and then really like the last one is I love the foot. I teach a lot of the speed training program from the foot.
Perfect.
ALTIS kind of talks about pressure. So I always talk about like how does the foot act and react in the ground? Because to me, tibialis anterior strength and stability is one of the most important qualities that I can train in our athletes.
Wow.
Because if my foot is not striking the ground, there we go. Now my force dissipation is coming back into my head, not force absorption.
Oh,
I'm
there
dissipating
it is.
force better.
Yeah.
And that's where like even Goda is interesting to me of how they treat the foot and how the pressure of how we contact the ground affects performance. So I spend a lot of time teaching foot pressures, which that's through ankle hops, ankle flips, any level of pogo jumps, even vertical jumping, and then that can translate to how we strike the ground when we run. And that's really boiling it down to rhythm and shape and peace, and those are really like my biggest takeaways. I love dribbles. I think they're great. It's not always the cleanest look, but when kids start to understand the keeping of shape, is stuff that I have to talk about a lot, because like we may dribble really, really well, and then when we go to upright running, we lose our shape. I'm like, ankle dribble to calf dribble to upright running, which we could almost call a knee dribble, should be almost the same cycle. It's just the intensity of the cycle and how that affects the upper body and then in turn the lower body of the distance of stride length and everything else. So like learning cues from there, I think has been important, and stuff that I've stolen and stuff that I've just like blurted out because it made sense in my head. And then all of a sudden, like a kid changed and like made a really good turn. And I'm just like, oh, I'm keeping that.
No, that's perfect. Even though my athletes, they're not running on the ice, they're skating, and it's very different. I just think when I can get them moving more efficiently, better off the ice with a sprint, it's only going to make them better movers, more efficient force producers, and that translates to the ice, like for sure. So give me 2 or 3 practical things for the coaches at home that you're like, you got to be doing this, you got to be doing that. So you mentioned anterior tib strength. You mentioned some pogo jump, stuff like that. What are, like, no matter what, these are always going to be in your program, or hey, make sure this exercise. Give me some of those practical things.
For us, we're always going to lunge.
Okay.
Or have different dynamics of that, and I'll kind of file a split squat in there too. I like the ISO split squat, the Jefferson split squat, whatever we want to call it. It's really dependent on the equipment that you're using. So being able to utilize with that, pogo jumping, of rhythm-based pogo jumping, performance-based, velocity-based pogo jumping, by doing band-assisted pogos, single leg, double leg, high, split. Like we see that everywhere in my program. I think it's like overlooked, but that's also connecting what I'm teaching from a speed dynamic and then what I'm teaching from a strength dynamic. I think a pogo jump boils that down for us really, really well. Glute development, especially in younger populations, is overlooked and under volumized.
I like that.
I want our kids to have the biggest butts in the world.
Yeah.
Because if you look at some of the best athletes that we know, they all have extremely developed gluteuses.
Yep.
So why am I not going to almost over volumize that development? So we do like a lot of glute bridge variations. We do a lot of rotations, even with sports that don't rotate, because it affects the hip. So I think that's often overlooked. And I'm a band pull apart lover. I will do band pull aparts until my face turns blue and my kids' face turn blue. We're almost at a point that we're over volumizing that. But what we understand from just like a postural standpoint, especially in high school kids now who are technology based, front rolled chests, I'm gonna have to counteract that. So those are really like my big ones. And then I'm a max velocity guy. I will train max velocity the best that I can and as often as I can. Not necessarily as often as I can, but I'm checking that box as often as I can, because I was a kid who tore his hamstring 3 times, and that was detrimental to my career. So not letting a kid do that to themselves, I think, is important to me.
I love it. And how the times have changed, right? Where they have, we got to protect them. Don't let them sprint. That'll save their hamstrings. I don't know. You mentioned glute development, and again, always to bring things full circle. For me growing up, the most athletic looking body I had ever seen was John Wilkins, right? Mr. Wilkins. I was just like, man, this guy he's like carved out of marble. And again, just massive rear end, right? But just like an absolute animal. So as far as glute development, are you getting them on a bench, bar across the waist, and doing, the Brett Contreras hip thrust? Are you doing glute bridges on the ground, body weight, double leg, single leg? Are you relying a lot on your squatting or lunging for the glute development?
I'll barbell hip thrust some people, some sports. I like protecting the lumbar spine too. So understanding the ebbs and flows of that, I think, is important. But we're going to squat, we're going to lunge a lot. We're going to Cossack squat. We're going to do it in different planes, different vectors. We're going to have probably, most of my programs usually are about 8 exercises of a full training session. 3 to 4 to 5 of those will arguably be for glute development.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the flow of my room is a big part of it. I'm going to try to Copenhagen plank the most that I can. I'm going to try to do it from straight leg, from bent knee, from heel raise to really anything else. Different angles, different components of it, X-band walks, because what I know about mini bands in high school is they either get legs or they break.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
X-band everything because it's cheaper in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna push those, and then to digress with it, my mobility components need to be glute lateral based the
Okay.
best that I can. I'm going to have to take care of groins. I'm going to have to take care of lumbar spines. I'm going to have to take care of really glute medius and piriformis. So what are we doing from a mobility and stability standpoint? And that's where I think FRC is really, really good for my
Mm-hmm.
kids, of just hip angles, because it is a socket joint, is where we see the most benefit and where I have to check those boxes.
Awesome. And so, tons of glute development, tons of multiplanar. I'm just going to say lunges, split squats, for the sake of it. How are you making sure that you're not underdeveloping the feet then? Is that a part of every single one of your warm-ups? Are you having specific speed sessions where high velocity foot contacts are the emphasis? Are you a big spring ankle guy? Are you counting on all of your reverse lunges and multiplanar lunges to strengthen the foot and the anterior tib? Give me a little idea there.
Some of it comes in a warm up. From a pogo jumping standpoint, drop squats. We'll do some toe
Perfect. Yeah.
rockers, I kind of call them,
Okay.
which is just really focusing on that big toe mobility. Um,
Yeah.
Calf soleus shin raise is where we kind of see the most volume and consistent volume. I've started to get into some of the spring ankle stuff, especially with in-season kids.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, all of my sport coaches have like quote unquote checklist, which in order that they're trying to kind of check
Mm-hmm.
with their warm up, how we design their warm ups, what they're doing from a speed component to keep their kids healthy, and then really just like connecting that. And then I have slack blocks as well,
Nice. Okay.
that I like to use.
Yeah. Heck yeah. All right. Last thing I want you to talk about here. You've mentioned it several times. Tell me about your internship. And if you got to go, we could wrap it up too. I know we've been
Yeah.
on a while.
Yeah, my Emma's starting to get a little angry at it. Internship for us is really just driving what they're not learning in school.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you coach? How do you program? The different styles of programming and periodization, I think, is important. Like I'm going to teach my kids triphasic. I'm going to teach my
Mm-hmm.
interns conjugate training, tier system, because you may have to run it a different way wherever you end up. So really teaching them the ALTIS system. I'll put them through coaching the sports short sprints course,
Nice.
because I think it's important to understand our program. I'll send them down to our athletic trainer's office to learn from their angle as well, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the connection between those two sides is important. But really just putting them on the spot and making them coach,
Yeah.
because
Perfect.
you don't get that in school.
No, you definitely don't. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Kyle, that was unbelievable, man. Thank you so much for coming on, just sharing everything. Just high level, like super, super high level. I know a lot of people get a lot of good stuff out of this one. So everybody, make sure you follow Kyle on Instagram and Twitter, at Kyle Jacksic. And then Yeah, reach out to him. He's an accessible man, and the dude knows what he's talking about. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was another episode of Victory Over Self Radio. We'll have episodes available anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and we also have videos up on YouTube, and they are clipped out as well. I know there's going to be tons of clips from this one, Victory Over Self Athletics on YouTube. Kyle, thank you so much again. Enjoy your Saturday here, brother. Thank you so much for the time. You crushed it, and hey, we'll have to get some Taylor ham, egg, and cheeses one day. Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, brother. All right. Hey, thank you. Just do me a favor, stay on real quick.